I would now like to invite our Governor General to the podium. Welcome.
Well, Sheila, Elizabeth, friends, what a delight to be here. The only amendment I'd make to that very generous introduction by my great friend Elizabeth is she indicated that Sharon and I raised 5 daughters. It's the reverse. The 5 daughters have raised especially their father, which has been a great challenge. But I say I'm the most improved man in the world because every morning 6 women get up and say, "How do we improve Dad today?" Because he slipped back so much overnight. All the important things in life I've learned from my children. I say that not entirely in jest. And what a treat to hear from Firaz, Zoe, and Simone with those magnificent declarations that speak to the future of our country. Firaz, who referred to the Queen Elizabeth Scholars. You must be a founder, Firaz. You would be in the first cohort of the Queen Elizabeth Scholars. And emphasizing what I call the diplomacy of knowledge. Think of that concept, the diplomacy of knowledge, and helping us to be global citizens. And Zoe, with that great story of being the first in her family, isn't that a Canadian story? The first in the family to get a higher education, the great promise of Canada. And then emphasizing the challenge for all of us with reconciliation, to make Canada whole through reconciliation, our 2017 project. And Simone beginning with posing the challenges for us, the challenges, which for me is encapsulated in that great statement of John Gardner, Secretary of Education in the United States some 40 or 50 years ago. Can we have equality of opportunity and excellence too? Equality of opportunity and excellence too. To see those not as mutually conflicting objectives, but mutually reinforcing objectives. That's the great challenge for Canada, equality of opportunity and excellence too. So let me begin. Canada, a nation of losers. That's right, losers. I bet you weren't expecting to hear that from the Governor General today, were you? But that was the opinion of Hugh McLennan. How many of you know Hugh McLennan's works? Those of you who haven't, you have a treat in store from you. Hugh was a 5-time winner of the Governor General's Literary Awards. In fact, going back to the first one, they were first awarded in 1937 when John Buchan, Lord Tweedsmuir, was Governor General. He was one of Canada's greatest novelists of the 20th century. But he said that as praise, not as an insult, a praise. Pour Hugh McLennan, nous traiter de perdants était un compliment et non une insulte. By calling us all losers, he meant that many Canadians, with the notable exception when he was writing of Indigenous people, many Canadians came to Canada from abroad out of necessity. Les nombreux Canadiens venus ici par nécessité fuyaient la guerre et fuyaient les femmes. They were fleeing oppression. They were fleeing lack of opportunity. But what were they fleeing to? Well, the opposite of those things. They came for peace, for prosperity, for tolerance, for opportunity. They chose to come to Canada from oppressive situations because they wanted life to be better for their children and their grandchildren and the communities in which they lived. C'est ce que le Canada représentait pour bon nombre de nos parents, grands-parents et ancêtres lointains qui sont venus ici. Paix, prospérité, tolerance et opportunité. Peace, prosperity, tolerance, opportunity. Pretty attractive, no? All four ingredients are essential. But I believe the last two, tolerance and opportunity, are the foundation of Canada's success, past, present, and future. Sans tolérance ni possibilité, autrement dit, sans inclusivité, il ne peut y avoir ni paix ni prospérité. An inclusive country, theme 1. Where Canada has succeeded, it has been through a commitment to inclusiveness, an understanding of and respect for difference. And more than that, our success stems from our diversity. It gives us strength. Where Canada has failed in the past, for example, the disastrous residential schools policy, it has been in trying to reduce diversity and restrict inclusiveness. Canadian society is at its best when it mirrors its geography, broad, expansive, inclusive. La beauté du Canada et la chose vraiment novatrice, c'est que nous pouvons incarner plusieurs de ces réalités à la fois. One of my predecessors, I mentioned a moment ago, John Buchan, Lord Tweedsmuir, author of 120 books, and writing was a part-time occasion for him. Just think of that, 120 books, not a small accomplishment. I think of Lord Tweedsmuir as I'm sitting in my office with a pile of stuff like that at 10 o'clock in the morning, and I look at Buchan's name on the wall, all the names of the previous Governor General are there, and I say, you know, Buchan would have had this done before breakfast, and he'd be writing the sequel to 39 Steps or some other great novel. Well, he was born in Scotland, which explains a lot, the son of the Presbyterian manse, and he served as Canada's Governor General from 1935 to 1940, years which saw the outbreak of the Second World War. Despite those difficult years, he was very optimistic about this country. And Buchan was among the first to articulate an essential theme of Canada, inclusiveness. John Buchan a compris que nous sommes plus forts lorsque nous embrassons la diversité. Il y a voyait la clé de la paix et la prospérité. C'est encore le cas. In 1936, for example, Buchan told a group of people of Ukrainian origin who had settled in Manitoba that you will all be better Canadians for being also good Ukrainians. Now, just think about that for a moment. Not merely you can be both Canadian and Ukrainian, but you will be a better Canadian for honoring your Ukrainian identity. The same applies to any hyphenated identity you can think of. Respect who you are and where you've come from, and respect where you are and where we are going together. In Canada, you can do both. Second theme, Canada's moment. Pensez à la façon dont cette notion de respect et de promotion de la diversité est devenue une réalité incontournable qui est parfaitement adaptée au monde dans lequel nous vivons aujourd'hui. Our world, a trite statement, is complex, diverse, globalized, and changing very fast. In fact, the rate of change is accelerating. I commend to you Tom Friedman's latest book, Thanks for Being Late. Nothing late about this epoch. And the remarkable thing that Friedman writes about, and I'll quote him a little bit later, is that the pace of change is actually accelerating exponentially, and how we grapple with that is so key. The fourth industrial revolution, the one that comes after digital, is all about emerging technology. It's the stuff of science fiction. In fact, science fiction writers are having trouble writing science fiction these days because it's become science fact. The Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, robotics, 3D printing, biotech, self-driving cars, nanotechnology, on. And like the first, second, and third industrial revolutions, the fourth is having quite profound effects on our lives. It's what revolutions do, and our capacity in terms of social interaction to deal with this extraordinarily rapid and accelerating technological revolution is very challenging indeed. In such times, our thinking, our behavior, our laws and institutions, and our learning must adapt and keep pace. Nous devons accepter qu'un changement se produira, que nous le voulions ou non. The only question is, to what extent do we shape that change? Or put another way, how do we avoid becoming its victims? The Pulitzer Prize-winning author, writer Thomas Friedman, I mentioned a moment ago, calls this the age of accelerations, plural, the age of accelerations. When people and societies are being challenged by the rapid circulation of ideas and change in virtually all spheres of life. How we respond, he writes, will determine our success in navigating this historical moment. Darwin once said, it is not the most powerful or the strongest of the species that will survive, it's the most resilient. To quote Friedman, he says, those societies that are most open to flows of trade, flows of trade, information, finance, culture, education, and those most willing to learn from them and contribute to them are the ones most likely to thrive in the age of accelerations. Those that can't will struggle. And he focuses on the flow of information, not the grasp of information, not the recording of facts, the storing of items of data in the brain, but the flow and the ability to participate fully in that. The title of this conference, Converge, is very apt. This is exactly what's happening in this age of accelerations, rapid, profound convergence on a global scale. And so how do we help shape that change rather than merely react? That's our challenge. That's your challenge. Que peut-on faire pour contribuer à façonner ce changement plutôt que de simplement y réagir? Voilà notre défi. Voilà votre défi. It's our 150th birthday. I believe Canadians have a unique opportunity to thrive and to make our voices heard in the world. This is a diverse, open country. As we all know, tragically terrible things can and do happen here, but we are by and large comfortable with our diversity. Nous vivons dans un monde diversifié, mondialisé, plein d'idées et de différences. Nous la célébrons aussi. Canadians are poised to engage with the world and to succeed anywhere. And this is Canada's moment. Third and final theme, the call to action. So my challenge to you is this. Let's not waste our moment. Get out there. Get involved. Speak up. Be part of it. As participants in this conference, you're among the leading lights of your generation. You come from right across the country, reflecting its wonderful diversity. Vous êtes les ambassadeurs de vos collectivités et de vos écoles, et j'espère vous vous passez à la prochaine étape. I want you to be ambassadors for this Canadian experiment. That's what it is, an experiment, and we want to make it a success. This experiment for reconciliation, for tolerance, for inclusiveness, for openness, for collaboration, for the possibility of Canada. I want you to champion Canada wherever you go. And that means defending and improving our open, inclusive society and demonstrating to the world that this is what Canada stands for. And that means training yourselves to think creatively. It means learning new languages and skills. It means speaking up for what you believe in. It means considering the perspectives of others, especially those with whom you disagree or don't understand. Engage with them in dialogue and in good faith. Inclusiveness means all members of a society matter. And at last count, Canada was home to 36,386,425 people, and every single one of them matters. Chacun de ces personnes compte. C'est une terre de possibilités pour tous. Voilà la possibilité du Canada. But we can't take it for granted. We can't assume success is inevitable. We have to advocate for the kind of country and the kind of world we want. We have to articulate it. Words matter. We have to build it. Actions matter. We have to live it. Conviction matters. I've worked with young people my entire life, and I have such complete faith in all of you. Je souhaite inviter tous ceux et celles qui peuvent offrir des possibilités à ces jeunes gens brillants, talentueux et dynamiques à passer à l'action. Donnez-leur la chance de nous montrer la voie à suivre. Ils sont prêts. In this, our 150th birthday year, a year of reflection and pride and accomplishment, we use it as a springboard to do more in the future. And let's recognize Canada's unique nature as we do that. Let's correct the mistakes of the past and build a more inclusive country. Let's encourage the world to learn from us and to work with us. It's 2017. This is the year to celebrate for Canada what it is, a country of losers that is in so many ways the envy of the world. C'est maintenant à vous d'agir et l'avenir est entre vos mains. Thank you for answering the call. Merci. Paul, you would be very disappointed in me if I didn't follow Dominic Barton's example. This is a book that comes out next month called Ingenious. I think Dominic showed it to you, and it's started out as 150 stories of Canadian innovators, and what did we end up with, Stephen? 250 or so, and had to close the list. Then there'll be a second edition, which will be the ones we missed. But it's intended to develop a culture of innovation. And there's now a children's edition of the book. And this is what Paul wanted me to say as a former representative of Canadian publishers. All the royalties go to the Governor General Innovation Award, so I commend you to buy a copy. Thank you.
Thank you. Lovely to be with you as well. Our first question happens to come from a student at the University of Victoria, Maxwell Anderson.
So one of the things that intrigued me that we talked a lot about in this conference was sort of the difference between research and innovation, and Canadian companies having a difficult time staying in Canada or having the incentive to sell their idea to other countries or other companies across seas as sort of an exit strategy. And so with your work with sort of innovation and promoting innovation, what do you think are the best ways, I guess, that universities can do and also the government can do to encourage Canadian companies to stay Canadian?
Yeah, Max, I think it begins really in the family. And what we want to do is to develop children who are creative, who think out of the box, and who see things differently. I was at the University of Waterloo for 11 years as president. I remember the first year there I was addressing the University of Waterloo Entrepreneurs Association, 1,000 young people, entrepreneurs, they're all wonderful. And they asked me to address the topic at their conference of can you teach entrepreneurialism? Is it nature or is it nurture? And I began by telling a story. We have 14 grandchildren. And our eldest grandchildren then was 5 years old. Emma, a little girl adopted from an orphanage in Colombia. She and like the other 13 call me Grandpa Book, because I always bring a book to read to them. So I came to her home in Ottawa and I read the book, and because she's an active little girl, you have to keep her active. I said, now Em, your mom and dad tell me you're taking dancing lessons and you dance like an angel. Will you dance for Grandpa Book? And she says, well, Grandpa Book, if I dance for you, how much money will you give me? So you're always looking for a learning opportunity. I said, now, Em, Grandpa Book loves you, and you love Grandpa Book. Why don't you dance for Grandpa Book for love? She said, for love, Grandpa Book, you can dance for yourself. So she doesn't have our genes, which I think are entrepreneurial, but somehow she's picked up a fair amount of entrepreneurial instincts. I think you create an environment, and I think it begins in the home, of what having dinner together and actually discussing with your children ideas and what they've done. And from that creativity, of course, comes the idea of doing things better, whether it's just helping a neighbor who needs a little help, and you think of, instead of just passing by that neighbor on the way to school, you pop in and help them take out the garbage or whatever. And from that comes an attitude of kind of critical introspection in the right way. And if we can do that and develop a culture of innovation, I think we lose this problem we have where the public investment in research and development in Canada is pretty high on a comparative scale. The private investment with our corporations, our business enterprises, is pretty low, in part because we have been so reliant on hewing wood and drawing water, our natural resources, in part because I've been a branch plant economy, but in part because I think our educational system has not been sufficiently entrepreneurial in encouraging us to go the different route. And we have a couple great assets. One is immigration has been a great asset to this country because wave upon wave of immigrants have come here not simply being prepared to work harder and take advantage of our public education system. Children of immigrants, thrive more in our public education system than those of us who've been here for some generations. But they bring the new ideas, the different cultural attitudes, and from diversity, I think, come great strength, and we have to develop that. The other thing I would say, of all of the things I would do if I were back managing a university again, would be really to encourage international exchanges, to encourage the Queen Elizabeth Scholars that Faraz spoke about. Only 3% of our undergraduate population have an experience abroad. It should be 100%. It should be 100% because we have to be global citizens, not simply domestic citizens. And I've watched our 5 daughters that began international exchanges at age 12, best part of their education. And what happened to them is 4 transforming things. First of all, they became more curious. All kids are curious, but they became more curious. Why? Secondly, they became more tolerant. Not tolerant just in the sense of, you're different from me. That's okay. Nobody gets hurt. But you're different in why, and what makes that difference. Thirdly, their judgment became better. They were not content to get the last word, or what today we describe as bigotry. They wanted to hear the other side of the story. They wanted more evidence before they came to a conclusion. But the fourth and most important thing that happened to them is they became more empathetic, not simply sympathetic. You have a difficult situation, I feel sorry for you. Empathetic, I walk on your shoes. And those are the qualities that help us become more creative, more collaborative, and therefore more entrepreneurial. Long answer, sorry.
Wonderful.
Over here.
Emma, yes.
Yeah, yeah. It has been wonderful 2 days here. I have received a lot of positive messages so far, especially in terms of Canada as a country being diverse and inclusive. But sometimes, as a newcomer here in this country, my thoughts sometimes go back to my daily life, the reality. And the sad thing is, I can tell you, sometimes in my life and my friend's life, we encounter things like misunderstanding, intolerance, and even more serious racism. So it reminds me like the key issue here of this difference is actually education. Education kind of makes, broadens your worldview and makes it easy for you to accept difference among us. And when I think of education this way, I think we all policymakers of this country should make the education more accessible to more people so they can get education and make it like a better world in that way. So I know you worked in education for many years. So what are your thoughts on how to make education, at least in Canada, more accessible to people, to young people, especially higher education? Yeah, thank you.
Well, I have a zillion thoughts on that subject. Let me try to pare it down to a couple. Number one, we're not a perfect country. We have lots of challenges to overcome. Reconciliation with our Indigenous people is an enormous challenge. I mean, think of 150 years of history and that sad history. And reconciliation is the responsibility of Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. And that's a big challenge, and it's one we all must work at. When we think of our education system, what is good is that through our public education system, we really have worked as hard at accessibility, perhaps as almost any country in the world, but it's not perfect. We have a ways to go. One of the ways I illustrate that is there's an OECD study, and I'll just give you this example, and I could give you a zillion other answers to your important question, of social mobility in different societies as measured by the degree to which children meet or exceed their parents' level of education. So there are 32 countries in the OECD or so, and so they measured each of those 32 countries on social mobility as determined by the degree to which in each country children met or exceeded their parents' level of education. And they took the population of each of those countries and divided it into quintiles of 20%. And so that they measured each quintile on what was the base level of the parents' education and to what degree did the children meet or exceed those. Canada was in #1 place for the top 4 quintiles, the top 80%. So for 80% of the Canadian population, the children of that base group met or exceeded their parents' level of education to a greater degree than any of the other countries. And in fact, the notable group within that would be first-generation immigrants, where the gap, the achievement gap was even greater. So you look at that, say #1 place, top 80%, Hallelujah. That's real accessibility. Yeah, that's real equality of opportunity. And you expect that a rising tide raises all boats. The bottom 20%, in the bottom 20%, that achievement level puts us in the bottom third of OECD countries. So something strange is going on with the bottom 20% of Canadian population with respect to educational achievement of their parents and the inability for us to lift the children up and beyond that. That's a huge challenge, and that's one we have to answer through our public education system and other community reinforcing techniques that get at that particular challenge. So we have a ways to go.
My name is Yang Xu. I'm the Minister Counselor for Education of the Chinese Embassy here in Ottawa. I don't know how many international representatives at this conference, but it's been interesting, and thank you for the invitation. And I heard many times you all are talking about to bring the Canadian students more international experiences.
About what?
About provide more opportunities for Canadian students of international experiences. And you just mentioned, answered the previous question. And I know there was an international education strategy several years ago for Canada, but that strategy mainly to bring international students to Canada. But I don't know if there's any national strategy or any support from the central government to support Canadian students to study abroad.
Yeah, not enough on both sides of that equation. We have much more to do, both in making Canada a welcome home for people coming to study here, particularly if they return to their own country and provide leadership there. And as I mentioned earlier, undergraduate Canadian students, only 3%, that's far too little. Yeah, there's been some initiatives, some attractive initiatives by the Government of Canada, some by the 10 provincial ministries and 3 territorial ministries, and then some from particular universities and communities. We're said we have a problem because we're a federated state, and education is the jurisdiction of the provinces and not the federal government, so the federal government doesn't have a major role in that. That really is, I think, a bit of a smokescreen. If these things are important enough, you do them. One of the initiatives that I'm quite excited about is the Queen Elizabeth Scholars that Faraz spoke about, where when Queen Elizabeth celebrated her Diamond Jubilee, 60 years on the throne, and yesterday she celebrated 65 years, the longest serving monarch in British constitutional history, the Government of Canada took an initiative of a $10 million gift to honor her. And then Mr. Chrétien, the former Liberal Prime Minister, ran a campaign across the country of matching monies from the provinces and matching monies from foundations and individuals, et cetera. That raised about $42 million. Am I close, Stephen, in that number? Scott, am I close on that? And then that was matched one for one by the universities across the country. So with that first round, we have about 2,000 students. Scott, Stephen, I'm close on that. 39 universities participating. Close on that, Paul? Run by Universities Canada. And it's for Canadian students, undergraduate and graduates, going abroad for a 4 to 12-month internship, work experience, volunteer experience, academic exchange, or students from Commonwealth countries coming to do master's and PhD work here, with particular emphasis not simply on the academic exchange, but the cultural exchange, internships, et cetera. We should ramp that up tenfold, and will, I think, as we go along, as one specific example to deal with the issue that you just raised, and that was the leadership of the Government of Canada. Mr. Chrétien took this on. He's a very funny guy, Mr. Chrétien. He said, he says, everybody's mad at me. He says, all of the Tories are mad at the Prime Minister because he, a Conservative, invited me, a Liberal, to take this on. All the Liberals are mad at me for accepting this responsibility. And he said, my wife is really mad at me. She says, Jean, you're 84 years old, you're no spring chicken, you shouldn't be doing this anymore, but he did it and did it very well. And Universities Canada is the partner that's making it happen. I could give more answers to that question, but that's a start.
So what are some quick recommendations that you can give to everyone in this room that could help them help others achieve their full potential?
Say that again. Everyone in this room help others to help what?
Yeah, what are recommendations you could give to help others, for people to help others to help them
Yeah, I got it.
achieve their full potential? Sure. Are we there? Did we do it? Okay.
Yeah. Got it. Second question? Way at the back.
Thank you. I was wondering if there were any long-term education strategies that would go beyond just a bachelor's or graduate degree, something that would address a lifelong form of learning that is also reflexive of the education being received and taught. Sorry, it's not that short.
Well,
It is a yes or no question, however.
Answer to your question is yes, and there are many. In particular, I would look first to Universities Canada, and particularly the strategy that's developed for Canada's 150th, what I think is very, very exciting. Paul and any of the university presidents in the room could talk at length about that, but it's wonderful to see how universities have responded. The person who occupied Elizabeth's position as chair before David, who occupied it before, Stephen Toop, who shortly to become Vice Chancellor at Cambridge University, was UBC president before Santa. Stephen wrote an essay on I love you, please change. Interesting, huh? I love you, please change. And it was his constructive criticism of Canadian universities, which was bang on, and I commend that to you. Coming to the question of how do you help others to help themselves, just a variety of ways, but if you're students, reach out to the person that's having a little difficulty, perhaps difficulty academically, perhaps difficulty socially, mental illness. That's all of our responsibility. If you have a classmate, and probably not a friend because you'd be closer with your friend, but acting a little strange, you put your arm around the shoulder. Say, I know life is difficult. 1 in 5 of us suffer depression from some time. Let's talk a little bit about it, and maybe you'll come over with me to see the counselor. What I'm really saying in answer to your question is the simple answer is move from the first person singular to the first person plural. Move from me to we. And when that happens, a wonderful transformation takes place in your life. Life is a lot richer. Life is a lot more interesting when you're engaged with other people. And it's not how you climb the highest mountain, but how arm in arm you climb a mountain together. And the simple notion of reaching out to help others to achieve their goals, and you are in this room all remarkably successful people, the envy of your other colleagues on campus. Reach out and help those that need a little bit of help, and instill in them the kind of self-confidence that you have, that you can overcome. And life is really interesting when you are able to project beyond yourself and reach out and help others. That's why I speak about a smart and caring nation. My installation speech was entitled, A Smart and Caring Nation, A Call to Service. And both adjectives are important, smart and caring. That's the kind of people we want to be as Canadians. Thank you, Missy.
Merci à votre Excellence pour ces mots inspirants. And thank you so much.